So, with that somber beginning to this episode of the New Media Show, is really a remembrance of our longtime friend, Todd Cochrane, who has been really the lead of this show, this New Media Show, and the lead of his company, Blubrry, and in a lot of ways, along with Adam, have been a significant leaders in the podcast medium and the phenomenon that has happened over many, many years. And I've been lucky enough to be a companion of his over that long 20-year plus journey here. And it's not a real happy time. I've been very overwhelmed by the response of the community overall and all of the nice things that people have had to say about Todd. And I've actually, it's been very, very touching to me. I didn't really realize how close I had gotten to Todd, really. And I guess if men don't typically do that quite as much, I think is the conventional thinking. But I wanted to pull together this a remembrance last episode of the New Media Show. I haven't 100% decided if I will keep this show alive or not, but my thinking is at this point, at least a break here of sorts to remember Todd. And I'm lucky enough to have a couple of three great people that were willing to come on the show and help me do this last show. Because it's not the easiest thing, for me to do. As Rob Walch from Libsyn, who I know has been a very long time friend of Todd's, and he and I have, the two Robs and Todd have spent a lot of time together, and we've done a lot of events together, and we've done a lot of things together. And I know Adam Curry, who's also able to join us here. Really, I think the core reason that Todd actually got involved in podcasting was because of you, Adam, and your daily source code. That was the thing that opened his eyes to what was possible with podcasting. And so I thought it was very poignant to have you here on this episode too, because it's like a full circle moment. And then Mr. Mike Dell, who has been at Todd's side for many, many years in helping him and being a friend of his since the very early days of podcasting, and help Todd really build the platform that Blubrry is today. And I appreciate him being here as well. I've known all three of these guys the whole time that this podcasting medium has existed, and we've all been good friends, and we've talked about podcasting a lot. So I wanted to start just with Rob here, and if you could share some thoughts that you have on Todd, and what are the big important takeaways that you have as you look at Todd's life and Todd's overall significance in the podcasting space?
I'm fortunate enough to have known Todd 20 plus years. So excuse me if I lose my voice here a little bit. I interviewed him. It was one of the first 20 plus people I interviewed on Podcast Wrong One back in March of 2005. I asked him at that time what was the first podcast he listened to, and Adam, it was the Daily Source Code, and it was the one he was at that time was listening to still. And then just take a little history. Went to Nomedex that year. Rob, that's where I met you.
Yep.
John Wall and Todd and me, all four of us went out to dinner. And I remember Todd coined us the FNGs because we were there at Nomedex in the blog world, and we were just podcasters. We weren't bloggers. And Adam, you were there at that event, and that was where you gave us a little hint that Apple was about to drop some news. But this was all pre-Apple supporting podcasting. And, when I did that interview with Todd, not all of it made it up in the air, and I just remastered it. But parts that I cut out were talking about he didn't want to have the stuff about the Navy because he was still full-time in the Navy when he started everything that he did in podcasting in Blubrry and RawVoice. He was finishing up his Navy career, and I don't know how he had any time to sleep. Everything he was doing, and then he put that energy into podcasting full time, and eventually it led to the Association of Downloadable Media. If anyone remembers that, we tried to get metrics worked out, and then eventually that led into the IAB, and we were on all those IAB calls, and me and Todd were always back channeling, cracking jokes about something someone said that was off the, not quite accurate, or things like that. But he really, really, really cared, like no one else, about the indie podcasters. And I was lucky enough to, be at the events that you mentioned: Podcast New Media Expo, Blog World, obviously Podcast Movement. Both of us were the original funders for that, when it was a GoFundMe kind of thing. We did Podfest. We've done NAB, and many other events. Some that were not, even close to podcast specific, but we went. He would look where I was presenting or exhibiting, and I would look where he was exhibiting, and we would wind up at the same events. And we got spent many a nights talking about podcasting. As you know, Rob, the three of us, we till 2-3 in the morning, talking about podcasting. And my wife would be, "Why are you out so late?" I'm like, "Well, Rob and Todd again."
Yeah. Yeah, that happened quite often. Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the things he worked hard too was about fraud, and keeping fraud out of the space. And if he saw a show that was doing that, moved over to us, he'd give me a heads up, and vice versa. And he really cared about the integrity of the space. And I can't say how much I'm going to miss him.
Yeah.
Incredible amount.
I know. It's been rough.
Yeah. So,
Mike, why don't you share some thoughts on your experience with Todd?
Oh yeah, I tell this joke. It's not really a joke, but it sounds like it should be. But I was with Father Roderick and Trucker Tom, and we were walking to the Libsyn party that happened to get shut down that time. Whatever happened there. So we said, "Oh, let's go check out this Blubrry party." And I walk in there, and here's this skinny at the time, clean cut Navy guy, and he hands me a beer and says, "Welcome to Blubrry." And we hung out, and I've been kind of a hanger on for the team for a while, and then got hired, and the rest is history. It's been a wild ride, I'll tell you. And there's a lot of things that I'm gonna miss. Rob, you were talking about the back channel on meetings. We had that all the time. It was usually full of some colorful language and whatnot, but both internal meetings and external meetings and all that. And, it's just not going to be the same.
No,
for sure.
So, Adam, do you have any thoughts on Todd?
Yeah. Thanks for putting this together, Rob. Really appreciate that. That's very, very nice. And it's good for everyone to heal. I mean, I'm 61, and a lot of people I know have died in the past 10 years, certainly from my old career in the music business. Those people never last long. But man, when you sent me the email a couple of days ago, I was really in shock. And because there's people that are just there, always the same, always fun. I mourned with Dave Jones, who sends his regards. Of course, Dave and I have been doing the Podcast Index and Podcasting 2.0 for the past 5 years. And Todd has always been a big part of that, pushing every single initiative forward. And this was a weird one. I mean, really, for me, it's like, whoa, this hit me harder than anybody else. And I reflected on it and said, why is it? Because Todd was just always there. Todd was always Todd. And you could always count on. I mean, if I just think all the way back, he was the most unlikely guy to be in podcasting. He had a crazy voice. It's like that was kind of the beauty of what podcasting as it started out. It's just raw and said what he wanted to say. To this day, even just a few weeks ago, I'd always smile walking the dog, hearing Todd talk about algorithms. I don't know if that was purposeful, but I was like, I kept shouting into my phone, it's algorithms. So I saw him just in Dallas at Podcast Movement, and it was so good to just see him because we hadn't seen each other personally in years. And the last time I think we actually saw each other, he's witnessed my 2 previous marriages and divorces. He's been with me in my life for a long time, and I think the last time we might have seen each other in person was in Austin when I was still living there. And we bumped into each other on the street at night, which is really a kind of an odd occurrence. And he was a big supporter of Value for Value. He supported the No Agenda show, just a fantastic guy. And as I reflect on all the things he's done, the voice that he's been for podcasting, it's a loss. It really is a loss, because I knew that no matter what crazy ideas were out there, what people came up with, or what maybe the podcast industrial complex was doing, if Todd was against it or for it, he would let you know. And that is really what I will miss most about him. On the other hand, I think that, and I pray he's with our Lord in heaven, that he is just enveloped in his arms. I feel that Todd would really want us to remember him for the funny guy that he was. He could be serious, but man, he had a sense of humor about him. We would make so much fun of him all the time, and he always took that in such stride, because of course there'd always be, oh no, I'm under DNA, I can't talk about that. So I expect him to pop up at any moment and said, just want to let you know, no, Adam, I can tell you about heaven, but I'm under DNA from God, so I can't say anything. That to me was Todd, just a great guy, and his memory will be with me forever.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And
no matter when you talk to him and what situation, he was always the same guy on the podcast, same guy in person. Even just one-on-one, he was, always Todd. I mean, there was no other way to describe it.
Yeah, and I think that this whole new media show is just an extension of Todd's overall approach and philosophy and things like that. And even though there were heated times on the show between he and I about ideas about podcasting, and it just really showed every week his passion for the overall medium. I mean, we both had the same intent in mind. It just maybe occasionally we had a different pathway of getting there, but it was really kind of remarkable, really. And I think it's a sign of the earlier age of podcasting, just like what Adam was talking about how, and Mike, you were too, about how Todd would just, speak his mind, show up. I mean, that's what this podcast was. This new media show was. Both of us, I think I posted it on Facebook too, but it was just an appointment on our calendar, right, for many, many years. And for a few years, we did it twice a week. And really what it was we just pulled down our microphones and started talking. And I think that's what the difference is between, I think what a lot of people perceive podcasting to be today is that it's this highly produced, highly polished, almost like broadcast production, right? When it really didn't come from that. And I think his background of being in the Navy for many, many years, and he's just so heavily into technology, and that was really the driving force about this. And Adam, you can speak to this too. And both Mike and Rob have a background in technology too, so there's a common thread here. Adam has definitely had a more broad background in the MTV days and being an entertainer of sorts, but most of us came from more of a technical background. I've got a marketing background, but I was very steeped in the technology side, but that was the big thing about tech with Todd that really made him stand out and what really made this medium possible. I don't know, Rob or Adam, do you want to talk about that aspect of Todd and why that was so important?
Well, I'll say that I don't know exactly the extent of Todd's technical background. To me, whenever we talked, he felt like he was a tinkerer like me, and particularly when it came to putting stuff together. It's always like, okay, I'm hearing myself back. Oh, wait a minute, I've got another delay here. Sorry, that camera just went on the fritz. Oh, my drive died. I mean, I identify so much with all of that from Todd, and I'm just happy that he built up a nice team around him at Blubrry that really supported his ideas, because I can identify with that. And from everything I know, everyone at Blubrry really loved him. His board, people who worked with him and worked for him. And it can be challenging with a tinkerer, because I know that he would come up with an idea and I want it implemented and let's get this done and how can we make it happen? That was definitely one of the special aspects of him.
Yeah, you could see it in the production of the New Media Show. There was a lot of regular technical issues, and that was kind of an issue with really doing any kind of live production. And he wanted to own that whole process too. I mean, we did a few episodes like this one on a platform like a StreamYard or whatever, but I don't think he ever really liked that.
But Rob, this is my favorite part of this show. For the past year, it's always been Todd's talking about stuff and you come up with video and then you get into this huge argument. And again, I always listen to the media show when I'm walking the dog, I think like Wednesday nights. And the dog is always looking at me like, why are you laughing? I said, because this is funny, dog. Listen to these two guys. If just the video audio conversation got to a point where it was just like, oh, I need a little bit in my diet right now. Let's tune into the New Media Show. I need to hear this argument. And of course, I was always on Todd's side.
Of course. Yeah.
Me too. I have a face for radio. So that's how that works.
Rob, what's your thought too? I know you're
Todd,
an engineer, kind of programmer, technical guy too.
I think Todd probably at his happiest at CES.
Right.
I was lucky enough to go to a couple of CESs when he was there and running around, as crazy as it was, and doing all the recording. But I mean, he definitely really enjoyed those events and setting it up. And obviously, he enjoyed the money he made from it. But I think, take the money away, he still was just happy as could be at that event.
He's a gearhead like most of us, just wants to tinker with things and I got this new microphone. Does it make me sound any better? Or new camera, new this, that, the other thing. And, there's always something, I've done a show with him as well, the Podcast Insider for Blubrry. And it's, we had the same sort of technical issues, except for later on, I started to be in charge of recording. So that worked. But
yeah. And part of it is that he loved to tinker so much that he was always playing with new gear and new things to try and learn about new tech, new devices and stuff, and companies would like send him stuff. So he would it was almost like they were force feeding him into that kind of pattern that he loved to do so much. So it really kind of showed in the show. And like Adam just said, I can so much appreciate it, because in the early years, you kind of had to be a tinkerer to be successful in podcasting. It wasn't a easy thing to do like it is now, or easier. Right.
I remember I went to CES a couple times, helping with the live stream and all that. And I mean, there was just always something going on that was messing up, but we all pulled together, got it going. And usually it was Todd right in the middle, running wires and plugging things in and, all that. But yeah, you're right, Rob. He was definitely at his best at CES. He'd come back to where we were live streaming. So I just did this great interview with this outfit that does whatever. And, he was just so excited about, all the stuff there, even even all the iPhone and iPad cases back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, he set up. I mean, a lot of people don't know this about Todd, but he would set up a whole video production, live video streaming production from CES, and he
We
would
had
go
to rent
around
a
all of the
full-size
booths.
van to haul all the stuff in there every year. So,
Right. I mean, it was a big production. I mean, I went down there a couple times and helped him carrying around cameras and stuff like that to go around and record conversations at the CES booths and stuff like that. And yeah, so we had a fun time down there. I know, Mike, you were down there a fair amount of time too, but he had a whole crew because he started a podcast network. It's called the Tech Podcast Network. And I was an early member of that with the radio show that I did. And so I got involved and helped him stream some of the audio content over a streaming server that I had.
We had a 4-camera, switchboard, the whole thing, and lighting, and had an overhead shot camera so they could show the stuff. I mean, we had it dialed in. About every 10 minutes, we were interviewing somebody.
Yeah.
Todd had a lot of firsts in this space, right? The first podcast awards.
Yeah.
Which
right.
we would say when I talk about it, I'd be like, Todd, why are you doing this to yourself? This is so.
Right.
I mean, I
was wondering about that.
You get only grief. You get grief from this. It was. He was glutton for that, but he really wanted to help. Have people acknowledge in those awards, and I think more than anything else, Todd, he tried to do whatever he could to get the word out about podcasting. Mainstream media.
And he wrote the first book on podcasting, the Do-It-Yourself Guide, back in 2005, which was
a copy of it back here somewhere.
Yeah, I've got one behind me too on the shelf.
Everybody has a copy. It better be signed.
That's right. So I mean, it's really a record. I mean, I think that book now is really a record of what podcasting was like in the early years, and it's. I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on this. I mean, podcasting has changed a lot in ways that are maybe not as significant as we all kind of like to think, but the core of it really hasn't really changed, right? Adam, do you want to talk about that?
About the core?
Yeah, about what podcasting is really all about, and what it's been about, and that even today, the foundation of podcasting is still core in that.
Well, yes, and I think Todd was a big proponent of this, although we argued often about the concept of grow your show,
right,
or how to grow your show.
Right.
Look, what was great about podcasting, that's exactly, as I said earlier, that's exactly what Todd was, is like the beauty of it was not slick, produced, removing all the ums and the ahs, being like, creating a wall of sound of editing, that everything was perfect. The beauty for me in the early days was listening to Michael Butler, the Rock and Roll Geek Show, drinking a 6-pack, talking about a crappy gig he had, listening to Dawn and Drew in their farmhouse, listening to Todd fumble and bumble and stick things together and talk about early hosting. That's really what it's always been about. What I call the podcast industrial complex has definitely had a mind shift, and that's because of it's understandable. Money, big names. There's so many huge success stories, but ultimately, I prefer I still listen to Dave Weiner's scripting news podcast. He doesn't even call it a podcast. He just records something on his iPhone and uploads it. That to me, the voices who just have something to say for anyone who wants to listen. That to me is what podcasting has always been about. And the more I talk about it, the more I see people understanding that they can just do whatever they want to do and do it for a very smaller local community, hyper-local podcasting, which I think Todd also kind of glommed onto. And I hope a lot of the hosting companies see that as really the next phase of where we can go, because people are even somewhat intimidated from, well, I mean, how can I be a Joe Rogan? Well, you don't have to be a Joe Rogan. You can do something for your town. You can do something for your school, something for your club, something for your church. Todd got that. He really did. And if anything, the new media show proved it. That's a show for people like us. Not a huge audience, really. I mean, relatively speaking.
Right.
But is where he could express his views, argue with you, you express your views. That is what podcasting has always been about to me. I think it's still alive and well. And I'm just looking at the comments. A lot of people are saying we should have an award for Todd. I'm all in on that. I think it's a great idea. I'm not quite sure what we should call it, and I don't think he would want it to be the indie podcaster. But we should come up with something for that, because he deserves that. And there's definitely a place that can be memorialized with something like that.
Yeah, I was planning on adding him to the roster of the Podcast Hall of Fame that's coming up. A special award on that.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
So we can, maybe there's something else that we can do too. But
The best podcast not from LA, Chicago, or New York.
Yeah,
right,
Just
exactly.
Michigan, the best podcast from Michigan. That's right there.
right. Yeah, and I want to say I appreciate everybody who's watching this. We've got a large group of people that have tuned in to watch this this live show, and there's just a fantastic flow of people giving us heartfelt comments and things in here. And I just want to say and acknowledge that and say I would love to go through and talk about each one of these comments, but that would turn this into a 3-hour episode. So, but yeah, it's really an honor for me to have spent so many years with Todd doing that show, Adam, and it was really, he was just such a strong believer in this non-editing thing, like you were talking about. I mean, I think I got pulled into, in editing, and I think there's nothing wrong with it. But I do think that there's something wrong with it if it goes too far. And that's oftentimes what people were tempted to do. But Todd was really looking for, actually at the end of the day, because he told me this over and over again, he was looking for efficiency. He was looking for trying to get, come in, get the content done, get out, and so we can move on to something else.
Yeah, that was, when we're, planning products or improvements and stuff at Blubrry, he was always in there, like, let's make it quicker, make it easier, make it quicker, and that was, his call every time, was like, well, is this going to slow people down? There's not, people got things to do,
Yeah. Yeah. Daniel J. Lewis has a comment in here, and it says the Todd Cochrane Award needs to be part of the podcast awards. Well, I think it's a big question what's going to happen to the podcast awards too.
Wasn't that single-handedly Todd? The podcast
mostly,
award?
yeah. I would say
pretty much.
Yeah.
He had some sort of team behind it, but us at Blubrry weren't really privy to all that.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't either. I mean, a lot of the access to even the new media show, that's why I say Todd was very much wanted to have it done the way he wanted to have it done. And so I didn't really have deep access into the back end of this show, to be quite frank about it. And it could be one of the reasons why we're not going out on all of his channels, is because, the setup that I have here was done when he was set up on a different platform.
Right.
And so I think he shifted to a new platform because he wasn't happy with the using StreamYard or using, like a Restream or something like that. Not to denigrate any of those platforms. It's just, he just had his own personal opinion about the quality and how it was done. So don't be surprised if you don't find this episode on any of Todd's channels. Hopefully it'll show up over there, but I'm not all that hopeful that it did.
It will go out in the RSS feed.
Okay.
So that I do have access to that. So I'll be able to post both video and audio on the RSS. So.
Yeah. I mean, is there anything else that you guys want to share about your memories of Todd and his kind of lasting kind of legacy? I guess, what does Todd mean to this podcast space? I mean, the outpouring that I've seen, what far surpassed what I expected. And I think the impact that he has had just he just hits a nerve with people, and I think it's very, very significant. So I don't know who wants to go first on that.
I always remember all the conferences and stuff. The booth, that was one thing, but it was all the after hours stuff. We'd be holding court in the bar, and there would be people coming in, leaving, and and just all the best conversations were that. And that's the thing I'm going to miss the most. Is not that I want to get too drunked up or anything at a conference, but it was it was just all those conversations, and you walk through just about anywhere around a conference, and people were stopping Todd all the time, and took you a half hour to get across the conference if you're trying to get somewhere.
Lots of people knew him.
Oh yeah.
So typical Todd was this most recent podcast movement conference, and there was a room for the Podcast Standards Project. And if you know how these conference things goes, everything costs something. And there was coffee and water, and I think some sodas in the corner, and which cost $400. Because that's what you have to do at a conference. You got to pay out the nose for all kinds of stuff. But that's Todd. Todd had arranged that. He said, we got to have coffee and sodas and water. And, he would do that kind of stuff because he knew how it was supposed to be. He didn't always succeed with how it was supposed to be according to him, but he always knew what he wanted and always stood for it. And I think you're right, Rob, just the outpouring from everybody shows what an impact he had on the industry. Mm-hmm. And his legacy will be in Blubrry, which I'm presuming can just continue the way it has. It's interesting that he was the first just a week ago. I think he was the first in 20 years in the industry to say, you know what, we're going to raise our prices. And I'm actually very sad I didn't get to have him on the Podcasting 2.0 podcast to hear him defend that and talk about his insights into it. But so in that regard, he was a leader of so many different things, a lover of all things podcasting, and he'll be forever in my heart. I'll keep him there, and we'll miss him as somebody who you could always count on to defend what was right, and to promote what he really felt was the correct way to move forward with podcasting, and not necessarily podcasting for profit, but podcasting for podcasting's sake.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest legacy I think that I take away from it is, what inspired him to get started in this medium was the non-commercialism, and that was a big theme. And Adam, you remember those days too. I mean, all of you guys remember when this medium started. It certainly wasn't pro-commercialism.
No.
It was, you got. I had a commercial radio show when I started podcasting. To be fully transparent about it, I had ads in my podcast, and when I started in 2004, and very few people did back then. So ones that did kind of faced a little bit of blowback, right, from their audience because of the expectations that had been set for that. Adam, do you want to talk about that part of it at all?
Well, I mean, about the expectations
of it not being commercialized. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point because Todd always walked a line there. Yeah, but he also made sure that whatever people wanted, he wanted to get them at the right price, the most efficient way, and the way that made most sense. Just in the past, week or so, he'd been working on chapter images and how that could possibly be used to track actual plays. As I think Rob mentioned earlier, a big part of the early measurement and getting some standards together. But I just always remember Todd saying it's not always about making money. And he would always give these statistics that such a large portion of the Blubrry customer base was not there to make money. They were there to podcast for multiple reasons. Now, when we started out with podcasting, we never even thought about money, honestly. It was just how can we get better gear? How can we get bandwidth? Rob, you guys were the first, and I always said, how do those Libsyn guys do it? I mean, I don't understand how they're making it so cheap. Something's up with this. What are these? Do they have a sugar daddy somewhere?
Most podcasts don't download a whole lot, so
this is
kind of
true.
works to our advantage.
This is true. So it really wasn't about that in the beginning, and I'm still, I've never run an ad on a podcast in my life. I love value for value. I love people supporting the show or any show because they get value out of it. Been pushing that. When we went to streaming value for value, Todd was right there, first one. Blubrry supported it. He believed in many different ways, but also, if people want dynamic ads, he'll help you insert them. That was Todd.
RawVoice started as an ad agency. That was the core business, and it morphed into podcast services and hosting and all that stuff. But Todd was very generous with his time with just about everybody. I mean, he didn't care if you had 20 listeners or 20,000 listeners. He would give you the time you needed to understand what was going on, how he thought it worked, and if it was technical, he'd send it to me. But anyway.
Yeah, and I think to kind of dovetail off all that, Adam, you're exactly correct. He also had a common saying that he said all the time was that podcasters need to get paid. So he didn't say how they were going to get paid.
That's
always.
Correct.
He always said that he was good. Podcasters needed to get paid for their time because he was held accountable with his own wife back when he started podcasting, that he had 2 years. It was like a countdown that they had to make it financially supporting him and them for him to pursue it. And I think that is also part of podcasting too. Yeah.
Rocky has a good comment there. Todd was the essence of radical candor. One of my favorite Todd stories was when he got an offer to have Blubrry bought by another company, and a certain person we all know, remember Norm, and the offer that was sent over was little less than what Todd would have liked. So he got on the phone with Norm and said, I got your offer here. Hold on a second. And he put his phone right next to the shredder and put the offer through the shredder.
Well, there's even more stories to that, Rob, because I was there when that whole thing went down. But yeah, he's. I don't think Todd ever wanted to be acquired by Podcast One, for one thing. So it was one of those things. And I do have a clip that I was wanting to play of a dialogue that happened with Norm Patitz, who's also passed away now, and he was the founder of Westwood One. Rob, you know him well from the past. Yeah, and so I wanted to play it because what it does is it paints a picture of the entrance of commercial radio and what the commercial radio side thought of podcasting and kind of how it's morphed. So let me go ahead and play that now.
Really excited to talk with you, Norm, about what you guys got going on, over at Podcast One, what you guys are doing. You guys are tearing things up and moving fast. I love that, to see a player in a space that is motivated and I guess I hate to say it this way, but breathing new fire into the space. So, what are you guys? I guess first off, why don't you just go ahead and give everyone a little background, Norm, about what you've done in the past, and I think that will kind of set the tenor here this morning.
Well, thanks. First of all, it's great to be with both of you. I know you both. Rob, you and I have chatted a few times, and Todd, I certainly know you by reputation, so it's a real pleasure to be able to sit down with you and chat. I started out in this business about 35 years ago and founded I had done some things before that, but probably my biggest claim to fame is that I founded a company called Westwood One, which I was the chairman of until a couple of years ago. And Westwood One was the largest producer and distributor of nationally sponsored radio programming, certainly in the nation, probably in the world. We owned, managed, or distributed NBC radio, CBS News, CNN. Plus, we provided lots and lots and lots of entertainment programming in the talk genre and the music genre. Countdown shows, live concerts, whatever you can imagine. And we dealt with probably 50% of the licensed radio stations in America. It's no coincidence that our move into on-demand audio, or as we call it, podcasting, that we created a destination and a site that's called Podcast One, because the story of Westwood One to Podcast One is an interesting story to tell. And the reason we moved in this direction was because of all of the similarities that I saw between forming Westwood One at a time when syndicated radio shows and network radio shows were not really very well thought of, or even part of the overall media mix of national advertisers. It seemed to me that podcasting today, is pretty much in the place where syndicated radio was when I started Westwood One, which was the original reason why it caught my interest.
So I think what's happening in the medium right now is we're in this transition phase in what's happening in industry that kind of has its roots in the past. Back when podcasting started, it was a revolution really against the commercialization of broadcast. And for a few years, it was an anti-commercial medium. I'm talking about podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we've kind of moved into a new phase where we've added more commercial elements. There's a lot more focus on monetization and people making money with their podcasts and programmatic advertising, which mirrors exactly what broadcast radio has been done on the air for years. And ad loads are going up. And so you can see a direct correlation. And in the early years, podcasting was a lot about video too. So
we become what we were trying to avoid.
Exactly. And things go in full cycle. And I think Rocky Thomas made a comment in this thread as well that kind of put a little ribbon and bow on this, that she's seen this cycle happen before with streaming radio and other types of media that has tried to transition audiences into a new delivery method. And so that's kind of what's happened here. We've transitioned our audience into a new delivery method for content, and that's why we've seen a lot of the big studios and commercial radio companies transition into doing more podcasting, is because they saw it as the future of their distribution, and that's really what we're talking about here. So if that's if we're okay with that, my question is, well, what's the next revolution that we're going to create as a blowback to over commercialization again? What's next?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Rob. And we'll see everyone here on the New Media Show. Everyone take care. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right.
So Todd's up there right now with Norm Patterson heaven going, I told you so. I told you so. I told you so. We lost Norm a couple of years ago as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I worked with Norm for a year down in Los Angeles. So, Todd would come down and come into Norm's office, and he and I and Norm would talk about the industry and where it was going. And what was really interesting about Norm's perspective is that, he was the guy that built, nationally syndicated talk shows on the radio side, and he could see that crossover with podcasting and wanted to do the same thing he did 30 years ago with podcasting, with what he did with radio. And so he could see that crossover, and that's kind of what we've seen happen over the years. And I don't know if Rob, if you want to talk about that and you know, the Todd's feeling, and also about the entrance of radio into the podcasting space and how they've done it, and what the implications of that are. I don't know if, you know, it's open to all three of you guys.
Yeah, my conversations with Todd are that, you know, we were always like, you know, just repurpose content. We were like, but it is what it is. You know, he was always open to anyone to come in. Didn't mean he had to like it, the content,
Right.
but he felt, you know, strongly that anyone should have a voice.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember a quote I heard from someone at NPR once was, NPR was created so that anyone could have a voice, and then podcasting came along and they said, well, we didn't mean everyone. You know, and but I think podcasting has always been welcoming, and Todd has been a big part of that, welcoming anyone in. He was going out finding businesses, going to different conferences. ADM is the one conference you go to, which is, and just for people to do internal podcasts for training their marketing team. You know, the RSS has so many powerful uses, and Todd understood that, and that RSS was at the hub and the heart of all of what we do. And to stay, and he had the fear, like I have the fear, you don't want to have too many closed walled gardens, right? As we have out there, more and more of these walled gardens popping up. I think you talked about it even, I think it was maybe on the last show, you guys talked a little bit about the walled garden issue.
Yeah.
With Spotify and that.
Mhm.
So making it open and for everyone, and legitimately meaning it, not like NPR where it's like, oh no, not everyone. Everyone's we want.
So any other comments on that clip?
Well, it just shows, you know, that even when he had a high-profile guest on, there was always technical things that he
Yeah,
was
didn't
working
I
on.
see his Mac one update during that?
Yeah, that's why I like that clip so much, because
That's so Todd.
it really showed the desire on our part with this show to kind of push the envelope and kind of go into areas that maybe were pushing the envelope, because that clip that I played for you was an episode that we did back in 2013. So, you know, this show started as the Saturday morning tech show, and we did that for a couple of years. I was just a occasional guest on the Saturday morning tech show. And then I made a suggestion at some point, probably a year into it, that we changed the name to the New Media Show, because
You
that's
did
all
that
we were
right on the
talking.
fly.
What's that?
You did it mid-episode.
Yeah, right. And Todd actually registered the domain name and got it set up probably before the episode was over.
I would say, I don't know exactly the history of it, but I always admired Blubrry and subsequently Todd for PowerPress, for the WordPress
Yeah, we haven't
plugin.
talked about that.
Because what's so cool about that is like, hey, here's how you can create an RSS feed. You can create a podcast feed. If you want to, you can connect it to Blubrry, but you don't have to.
No.
I always thought that was one of the most beautiful gifts to podcasting.
Yeah, we always wanted it to be hosting agnostic, you know.
Yes.
Just wherever you can find a spot for your file, it'll work.
I always love that.
Well, that's an unusual approach.
It's a great approach. I think it worked. I think it worked well for Blubrry, and it to this day. I mean, I have friends who still use PowerPress.
Yeah, and we're not planning on slowing down. We'll keep it alive here. So.
Good, very
Well,
good.
and a lot of I don't know that a lot of people realize this, but I think it was like a quarter. I don't know if Rob or Mike, if you can jump in on this, a quarter or a third of all of the RSS feeds out there are actually self-hosted. They're not. I don't know if that number's dropped or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but I
Take
know
out the anchor-
a
take
good
out the
portion
anchor.
of the web is Power or WordPress based. So
Right.
that, that I talk to new people into podcasting, and I said, "Well, do you have a WordPress site?" Well, here you go, and that's always been a great thing, whether they hosted with us or not. It was just something we wanted to give back to the community, and we were all behind it at the time. Angelo came up with PowerPress, and since the other plugin for WordPress got abandoned, that was the genesis story of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, Adam, in the early years, you created software to enable podcasting to happen. And I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that path and your work with software and kind of getting this medium started.
Well, creating software is a big statement. Stringing Apple script together with help from other people is more like it. That's why I started the daily source code, is because there was a concept. I had it working. It worked at my house. This little, I think I called it iPodder script. Yep. Would look for a new episode in a feed. I think it was just one at the time. And I think I was able to expand it to more than one later, but it would detect a new episode, download it to my computer, sync the iPod. We still had to have our iPod synced to iTunes at the time, and success. There it was. So I just always saw the iPod as a transistor radio. It had kind of the same format and dimensions. And so the daily source code was literally to attract software developers, thinking, you work in source code. We need source code. I'm going to do this daily. The only reason I did that is so that the software developers would have something to develop against. We learned some of the early things. Crazy enough, not a good idea when you first subscribed to a show when half the world or more than half the world was on dial-up. Not a good idea to immediately download all the episodes in the feed. I mean, that's literally the kind of things we discovered in those early days. So tinkering around is more like it.
Daily source code was my source code. I would get a copy of your feed and then change it to all my stuff and upload it to the web.
Oh boy, how did he do this? Fix this bitch. So, yes, indeed.
Yeah, and back in those days, you couldn't really, for the same reasons, Adam, you really couldn't make your media file too heavy, right? As far as its bit rate. I know I put out a lot of my episodes back in those days at like 23K or something like that.
Yeah, back in the day, when we were doing this, I literally had a Mac, and I was using, I think it was called Mac Drive, and it kind of mounted on your desktop. It just looked like a drive, and you could store stuff in there. And I was just putting my files in there and pointing to that. And I heard later from Steve Jobs that they noticed all this bandwidth, going out, and they were trying to figure it out. This is what he told me, so I'm going to believe it. And he said, well, what, it got to him somehow. And it's like, well, what are they doing with all this bandwidth? And said, well, they're working on this podcasting thing. I don't know if it had the name then. And, they were thinking about maybe shutting that down. And according to Steve Jobs, he said, no, let's just give him what he needs. Let's see what happens. And so I think that's what later led to a call to come and talk about putting podcasting into iTunes.
Yeah. And also another story that involves Steve Jobs in a connection with Todd is that, Todd's Geek News Central podcast would occasionally give, his opinion on hardware and devices and tech and things like that.
On occasion. How about
on occasion, right. Yeah.
Every time.
And he gave some feedback on a new Mac that he bought on his podcast. And somehow Steve Jobs heard about it and had his assistant, Steve Jobs' actual assistant, call Todd and tell Todd that Steve Jobs is on the line. Would you like to talk to him? And so Todd got on the phone with Steve Jobs. They called him because of the reach and the impact of his Geek News Central podcast. And
yeah, that's awesome.
yeah. And Steve wound up sending him a new Mac because of that conversation.
Oh, I never got that out of Steve Jobs. Man, I got screwed.
I guess they delivered it to the Apple store or whatever in Honolulu, and Todd went in there, and it was like the seas parted, and all the employees were staring. Oh, who's this guy? He got a computer from Steve. So,
yeah, I mean, it's an impressive story, but it's very much a part of that lore that is now Todd Cochrane. You know, he had that kind of impact with his podcast, and he was the only one that I've ever heard of that had a 20-year advertiser that stayed with him from 2005 to, you know, just this last week as a sponsor of a show, and that was GoDaddy.
The king of GoDaddy, Todd Cochrane, was definitely the king of the codes. King of the codes. There you go.
Right. Yeah. And that is so unusual. It's also because he was able to build this ecosystem around his discount codes.
Yeah, well, you know, the whole GoDaddy thing was it was the reason RawVoice started. GoDaddy calling us said, "Do you know any other podcasters that might want to advertise? This is working so good." And so he got on his show and said, "You know, I need a lawyer, I need a biz dev guy, I need a marketer, whatever." And that's how that company formed. And, you know, they didn't even meet each other until that first Portable Media Expo out in Ontario. You know, but the company had been going for 6 months or whatever. We're coming up on 20 years, by the way, at Blubrry, the 27th of September.
Yeah, Mike, why don't you share a little bit? I don't know if Rob, if you know the story a little bit about the beginnings of RawVoice and Blubrry. I know it was very much a grassroots funded startup that he created and was really the heart and soul of this. But I know he also had a lot of loyal friends that he had created around creating that company.
Yeah, well, initially we were going to have multiple verticals, you know, Blubrry being a community, and Tech Podcast was part of that. And we still have the domain, but we had Raspberry with no E's. I don't know what that was going to ever be used for.
That's completely different tech device, right?
In fact, I was just going through all the domain names on the list, and there's some fun ones in there. But yeah, that's how it started. And then, you know, at some point along the way, we decided we wanted to get into hosting. And that's where we decided, well, Blubrry would be good. You know, the parent company name would have probably been better for a hosting company, RawVoice. But
I always thought that was a terrific name. So I was surprised when he chose the name Blubrry, actually.
Right. And that stemmed from his parents were in the fruit distribution business. You know, blueberries, raspberries, all the stuff that's grown in southern Michigan. And then of course RawVoice. If you look at the logo for that, it's a carrot. Fresh organic media was the tagline.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting time for the company. I know a lot of the board and a lot of the people that joined him in building that platform. He built around building friendships with people that were, you know, connected to his network and just were attracted to him in a significant way to want to contribute. And a lot of the founding people of that company contributed a small amount of money themselves to help.
It was a bootstrap thing, you know, invested a little and it's been working out. You know, we've had team members come and go and all that, but you know, the core group is still there mostly. It was just you know, one of those things that grew out of nothing. I mean, everybody was part-time for a long time. I mean, Todd never came on full-time until 2015 or 2016, something like that. Maybe even been later than that. You know, I've been on full-time since 2015, part-time before that. And, you know, we all had jobs and, you know, we do this on the side.
Yeah, well, Todd was like that for many years in the early years, where he was still employed by the Navy as as a serviceman or as a contractor.
As a civilian there for a while, for
Yeah.
USA or whatever. But yeah, so when he moved to Michigan's when he went full time. I'm not sure what year that was, but
It wasn't that long ago.
no.
So was it like maybe 3 or 4, maybe about 4 years ago, he moved from Hawaii, because that's where he was, where he raised his family and had a connection to the naval base there. So that's kind of back in the time frame when I got to know Todd. Is that, I was living on the West Coast and up in Seattle, and he was in Hawaii, so it was always, doing these shows at 11 o'clock in the morning was like Todd had to get up at like 8 in the morning or something like that to be able to do the show.
Well, that Saturday morning show, I think he was up at 6.
Oh, I know. Well, he was an early riser,
Yeah.
mostly anyway. So, but yeah, I mean, and then during COVID, we did this show twice a week. So, and then we kind of got burned out of doing that twice a week and scaled it back again to once a week. And that seemed to work better with Todd's increasingly busy schedule.
Well, he was recording at one time when you guys were doing 2 a week and we were doing 2 a week of Podcast Insider. Plus he had some other show he was doing at the time. I forget, but I mean, he was like recording every day, sometimes twice a day.
Yeah. Yeah. So he never really gave up at all to any degree his podcaster kind of hat of sorts, where a lot of people in the industry over the last few years have. I mean, a lot of the people that lead companies and do things in the medium are not podcasters themselves.
Yeah, we still have, I want to say 5 podcasters on the team that have all been podcasting over 20 years. So that are still at it.
So before we kind of wrap this up, I was hoping not to go too much beyond an hour, but I don't know, Adam, if you want to give any final thoughts on anything.
My final thoughts are: I just pray for his family, for all of his friends. I mourn with them. I pray for Todd every single day, and thank him for what he was able to do while he was here with us. And the same goes, of course, for Blubrry and all the people who were affected by him, who were motivated by him, and may he long live in our memories.
Yeah, I think you will. Definitely going to live in mine. Rob, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, some knew Todd and I only as competitors, but I knew Todd pretty much as a friend.
Yeah.
And he was always willing to talk, and we always talked at every show. And going to a show where Blubrry's at and Todd not being there the next time is really going to hit home. I used to see Todd a lot more than I'd see my own boss. I'd see Todd 5 to 10 times a year. I used to see Lori once every 2 to 3 years. So he was just a great guy, and I could not have made it through those IAB calls every week if it wasn't for the back channel jokes. He really helped me get through that. And
it was a lot of frustration on those calls. I was on a few of them too. Yeah. Mike, is there any other thoughts that you have?
Oh, just it really sucks around here lately, obviously, and like I said, we're definitely praying with the family and everybody, and we'll get through it. Blubrry's going to soldier on in his memory, and we're not planning on slowing down. And I don't know who gets to go to those IAB meetings now, so I guess we'll figure that out.
Yeah, that's a small part of the challenge. Trying to replace his heart in that company is not going to be easy to do either.
And he always hated me calling him my boss, but I did it anyway.
Yeah, he just wanted to be one of the guys. Yeah, there's no question about that. And my final thoughts on this is that I just really appreciate the podcasting community who has really stepped forward and put forth a lot of heart and a lot of thought to the legacy that Todd is leaving and expressing their condolences. I've been overwhelmed by people expressing that to me, and including Todd in that, but primarily Todd, and just the recognition of the significance that he had. Sometimes doesn't surface itself until we lose somebody as much. And I know I've heard some people say that, I think James Cridlin said this in a group. If only people appreciated and were nice to each other when they were alive as much as they did when they were gone. So thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it.
Thanks for hosting this.
What's that?
I said, thanks for hosting this.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. I appreciate it. Okay. Have a great day. Bye.